Stand in the old city of Jerusalem today, and you're walking on layers. Literally. The ground beneath your feet isn't just stone. It's 2,000 years of rubble, conquest, destruction, and rebuilding. Archaeologists have identified 26 distinct layers of habitation here. 26 different versions of the same city, stacked on top of each other like pages in a book no one can fully read. This city has been destroyed at least twice, besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, and captured and recaptured 44 times. It's been the capital of 2 kingdoms, a province of at least a dozen empires, and a focal point for 3 of the world's major religions. Millions of people today consider it sacred. Millions more have died fighting over it. And yet, through all of that, through Babylonians, Romans, Byzantines, Persians, Crusaders, Ottomans, and British, Jerusalem is still here. Not as a ruin, not as a memory, as a living city of nearly 1 million people. So how did a small hill town in the Judean highlands become the most contested, most destroyed, and most rebuilt city in human history? That's the story, and it starts 3,000 years ago, long before anyone called it holy.
Before we go further, Primes, I want to know where you're watching from. This city's story touches every continent, every faith, every century. Drop a comment with your location, and if you want more stories about places that shaped the world, subscribe. This one goes deep.
The Canaanite city. In 2000 BCE, there was no Jerusalem, not yet. There was a settlement, small, fortified, built on a hill between 2 valleys, the Kidron Valley to the east and the Tyropoeon Valley to the west. The hill was narrow, steep, and defensible. There was a spring at the base, the Gihon Spring, which provided water year-round. This mattered. In a region where water was life, a reliable spring meant survival. The people who lived here were Canaanites. They called the settlement Urushalem, which appears in Egyptian texts from around 1900 BCE. The name probably meant Foundation of Shalem, referring to a Canaanite deity. It wasn't a major city. It wasn't even particularly important. It was one of dozens of small fortified towns scattered across the highlands. But it had that spring, and it had walls. By 1000 BCE, the settlement was known as Jebus, controlled by a Canaanite group called the Jebusites. The city occupied maybe 10 acres. Population, perhaps 2,000 people. It had a king, but no empire. Influence, but no power. It was vulnerable, surrounded by larger kingdoms. Sitting on trade routes but controlling none of them. And then, around 1000 BCE, everything changed. David's conquest. The Hebrew Bible describes it clearly. King David, who had recently unified the tribes of Israel and Judah, needed a capital. He needed a city that wasn't aligned with any single tribe, a neutral ground that could symbolize unity. Jerusalem, still called Jebus, fit perfectly. It sat on the border between the northern tribes and Judah. It wasn't traditionally Israelite, so it carried no tribal baggage, and strategically it was strong. High ground, water, walls. David's forces took the city, likely through the water shaft connected to the Gihon Spring. The Bible says his general Joab led the attack. Once inside, resistance collapsed. David renamed it the City of David. He brought the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in Israelite religion, to Jerusalem. And with that single decision, a small Canaanite hill town became the religious and political center of a kingdom. Population grew. The city expanded slightly north. David built a palace. He planned a temple but didn't live to see it built. That task fell to his son. The First Temple. Around 960 BCE, Solomon became king, and he did what his father couldn't. He built the temple. Not just any temple. The central sanctuary for the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. The Bible describes it in detail: cedar from Lebanon, gold overlays, bronze pillars, an inner sanctuary called the Holy of Holies where the Ark was kept. It took 7 years to build, thousands of workers, materials imported from across the region. The temple sat on Mount Moriah, just north of the old city of David. When it was finished, Jerusalem wasn't just a political capital anymore. It was the religious heart of Israel. Pilgrims came 3 times a year for festivals. Sacrifices were offered daily. Priests maintained the rituals. The city's identity fused with the temple. You couldn't separate them. Solomon also expanded the city's walls, reinforced its defenses, and built a palace complex. Jerusalem, under Solomon, was wealthier and more influential than it had ever been, but it was still small, maybe 20,000 people. Compared to Egypt or Mesopotamia, it was minor. And Solomon's kingdom didn't last. The split. After Solomon died around 930 BCE, the United Kingdom fractured. The northern tribes broke away, forming the Kingdom of Israel with its capital at Samaria. The southern tribes remained loyal to Solomon's son, forming the Kingdom of Judah with Jerusalem as its capital. Jerusalem was now the capital of a smaller, weaker kingdom. It still had the temple. It still had religious significance. But politically, it was vulnerable. And to the east, empires were rising. The Babylonian threat. By 600 BCE, the dominant power in the region was Babylon, ruled by King Nebuchadnezzar II. The kingdom of Judah was caught between 2 collapsing empires, Assyria to the north and Egypt to the south. Babylon filled the vacuum, and Judah, trying to navigate between independence and submission, made the wrong bet. In 597 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem for the first time. The city surrendered. The Babylonians didn't destroy it, but they took the king, the royal family, and thousands of Judah's elite into exile in Babylon. They installed a puppet king and left. 10 years later, that puppet king rebelled. 586 BCE. The First Destruction. In 586 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar returned. This time there would be no mercy. The siege lasted months. Food ran out. People starved. The walls were breached. Babylonian soldiers poured in. They burned the temple. They tore down the walls. They destroyed the palace. They looted everything of value and took it back to Babylon. The Bible describes it as total devastation. The city that David had built, that Solomon had glorified, was rubble. Most of the population was either killed or deported. The ones who remained were farmers, left to work the land. Jerusalem, as a city, effectively ceased to exist. For 50 years, it stayed that way. A ruin, a memory. The return. Then, in 539 BCE, Babylon fell to Persia, and the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, made a decision that changed everything. He issued a decree allowing the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Why? Probably politics. Cyrus wanted loyal subjects on the edge of his empire. A rebuilt Jerusalem, grateful to Persia, would be useful. Starting around 538 BCE, groups of exiles began returning. They found a destroyed city. No walls, no temple, just ruins and a small population struggling to survive. But they rebuilt. The second temple was completed in 516 BCE. It wasn't as grand as Solomon's. It didn't have the same materials, the same wealth, the same glory. But it stood. And with it, Jerusalem's identity as a religious center was restored. The city's walls were eventually rebuilt under Nehemiah around 445 BCE. Slowly, carefully, Jerusalem came back. But it would never be independent again. For the next 500 years, it would be ruled by foreigners. Hellenistic Jerusalem. After Persia came Alexander the Great. After Alexander came the Hellenistic kingdoms, first the Ptolemies of Egypt, then the Seleucids of Syria. Under Greek influence, Jerusalem changed. Greek culture, language, and architecture spread. Some Jews embraced it. Others resisted violently. In 167 BCE, the Seleucid king Antiochus IV went too far. He outlawed Jewish religious practices and desecrated the temple by sacrificing a pig on the altar. The result was the Maccabean Revolt, a guerrilla war led by a priestly family that eventually won. For about 80 years, Jerusalem was the capital of an independent Jewish kingdom again, the Hasmonean dynasty. But independence didn't last. Herod's Jerusalem. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey took Jerusalem. Judea became a Roman client state, and in 37 BCE, Rome installed a new king, Herod the Great. Herod was brutal, paranoid, and despised by many of his subjects, but he was also a builder. And what he did to Jerusalem was extraordinary. He massively expanded the Temple Mount, creating a platform the size of 25 football fields. He rebuilt the Second Temple in white stone and gold, making it one of the most impressive structures in the Roman world. He built palaces, fortresses, aqueducts, and theaters. He turned Jerusalem into a Greco-Roman city with a Jewish heart. The population grew to maybe 40,000. Pilgrims flooded in during festivals. The city was wealthier, larger, and more connected to the wider world than ever before. But tensions were rising. The Jews resented Roman occupation. They resented the puppet kings. They resented the taxes, the soldiers, the constant reminders that they were subjects, not citizens. Religious movements multiplied. Zealots called for rebellion. Apocalyptic preachers warned that the end was near. And then, in the early 30s CE, a Jewish preacher from Galilee named Jesus was executed by the Romans in Jerusalem. His followers would eventually turn that execution into the foundation of a new religion. But in the moment, it was just one more death in an occupied city. The brewing storm. By 66 CE, Judea was a powder keg. Roman governors were corrupt, Jewish factions were fracturing, and when violence broke out in Caesarea, it spread to Jerusalem. The Great Revolt had begun. Jewish rebels seized control of Jerusalem. They expelled the Roman garrison. For a brief moment, it seemed like independence was possible. But Rome doesn't lose provinces. The siege. In 70 CE, the Roman general Titus, son of the Emperor Vespasian, arrived outside Jerusalem with 4 legions. 60,000 soldiers. The city was packed. Pilgrims had come for Passover and were now trapped inside. Food ran out. Factions fought each other even as the Romans built siege walls around the entire city. The Jewish historian Josephus, who witnessed the siege, described it in horrific detail. Starvation, cannibalism, bodies piling up in the streets. The Romans breached the outer walls. Then the inner walls. Fighting moved to the Temple Mount. On the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, the same day, according to tradition, that the first temple had been destroyed. The second temple burned. Titus may not have ordered it, but once the fire started, it couldn't be stopped. The gold in the temple melted and ran into the cracks between the stones. Roman soldiers tore apart the structure to get at it. By the time they were done, almost nothing remained. Josephus estimated that over 1 million people died during the siege. Thousands more were enslaved. Jerusalem was leveled. Aelia Capitolina. In 135 CE, after another Jewish revolt, the Emperor Hadrian finished what Titus started. He rebuilt Jerusalem as a Roman city and renamed it Aelia Capitolina. He banned Jews from entering. He built a temple to Jupiter on the site of the destroyed Jewish temple. The city that had been the heart of Jewish identity was now forbidden to Jews. For 200 years, Jerusalem was a Roman provincial town. Small, quiet, largely pagan, and then, in the 4th century, everything changed again. Christian Jerusalem. In 313 CE, the Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, and in 326 CE, his mother, Helena, traveled to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. She identified what she believed were the sites of Jesus' crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. Constantine ordered the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over those sites. Almost overnight, Jerusalem became a Christian pilgrimage destination. Churches were built. Monasteries sprang up. The city's population grew. Its identity shifted from Roman provincial town to Christian holy city. By the late 300s, Christianity was the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, and Jerusalem was one of its most important cities. The Islamic Conquest. Then, in 637 CE, everything changed again. The armies of the Rashidun Caliphate, newly unified under Islam, swept out of Arabia. Byzantine Jerusalem, weakened by war with Persia, couldn't hold. The Muslim caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab entered Jerusalem. According to Islamic tradition, he prayed on the Temple Mount and established Muslim control. But here's what's important. Umar didn't destroy the Christian churches. He allowed Christians and Jews to remain in the city as protected communities. For Muslims, Jerusalem was already sacred. The Quran mentions the farthest mosque, which Islamic tradition identifies with Jerusalem. And according to Islamic belief, the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from the rock on the Temple Mount during the night journey. In 691 CE, the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik built the Dome of the Rock over that rock. It still stands today, one of the most recognizable structures in the world. Jerusalem was now sacred to three faiths. Jews prayed at the Western Wall, the last remnant of the Second Temple. Christians venerated the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Muslims revered the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque built nearby. For 400 years, under various Islamic dynasties, the city was relatively stable. Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived side by side. Pilgrims came from across the world. But in 1099, that fragile coexistence shattered. The First Crusade. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for a crusade to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. Tens of thousands of European Christians answered. They marched across Europe and Anatolia, fought their way through what is now Turkey and Syria, and in June 1099 they reached Jerusalem. The city was controlled by the Fatimid Caliphate. Its walls were strong, but the Crusaders were determined. On July 15, 1099, after a brutal siege, they breached the walls. What followed was a massacre. Crusader sources describe it openly. They killed Muslims. They killed Jews who had taken refuge in synagogues. They killed Eastern Christians who looked too foreign. Blood, according to one chronicler, ran ankle-deep in the streets. The Crusaders established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a Christian state that lasted 88 years. They built churches, fortified the city, and ruled over a population that remained majority Muslim and Jewish. Saladin's reconquest. In 1187, the Muslim general Saladin defeated the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin and retook Jerusalem. Unlike the Crusaders, Saladin didn't massacre the population. He allowed Christians to leave safely if they paid a ransom. Those who couldn't pay were enslaved, but there was no mass slaughter. Saladin's reconquest was celebrated across the Muslim world, and it fundamentally shifted Jerusalem's identity again. It would remain under Muslim control, with brief interruptions, for the next 700 years. There were more crusades, more battles, more brief occupations, but Jerusalem never returned to Christian rule. Instead, it became part of a succession of Islamic empires, the Ayyubids, the Mamluks, and finally, in 1517, the Ottomans. Suleiman's walls. In 1537, the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls. Those walls, the ones you see today when you visit the old city, took 4 years to build. They enclosed the Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Armenian quarters. They defined the city's boundaries for the next 400 years. Under Ottoman rule, Jerusalem was quiet. It wasn't a major administrative center. It wasn't wealthy, but it was stable. The population hovered around 15,000. Pilgrims still came, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish. The holy sites were maintained. Life continued. For most of the Ottoman period, Jerusalem was just another provincial city in a vast empire. Important religiously, but not politically. That started to change in the 19th century. The 19th century. European powers began taking interest in Jerusalem. Russia backed Orthodox Christians. France supported Catholics. Britain cultivated Protestant communities. Everyone wanted influence. Jewish immigration increased. Some came fleeing persecution in Europe. Others came for religious reasons, wanting to live in the land of their ancestors. By 1900, Jerusalem's population had grown to about 50,000. New neighborhoods were built outside the old city walls. The city was expanding for the first time in centuries. And then came World War I. The British take Jerusalem. In December 1917, British forces under General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem from the Ottomans. Allenby famously entered the old city on foot out of respect for its holiness. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and in 1920 the League of Nations granted Britain a mandate to govern Palestine, including Jerusalem. For the first time in over 1,000 years, Jerusalem was controlled by a Christian power. But it wasn't a kingdom. It was a mandate, temporary, bureaucratic, and unstable. Rising tensions. During the British Mandate, tensions between Jewish and Arab communities intensified. Jewish immigration increased, especially after the rise of Nazism in Europe. Arab Palestinians, who had lived in the region for centuries, feared displacement. Violence erupted repeatedly. In 1929, riots broke out in Jerusalem. In the 1930s and 1940s, both Jewish and Arab militias formed. The British tried to manage the situation but failed. By 1947, they handed the problem to the newly formed United Nations. The UN proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international control. The Jewish community accepted. The Arab community rejected it. And in May 1948, the British left. 1948. War and Division. The moment the British withdrew, war broke out. Jewish forces declared the State of Israel. Arab armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq invaded. Jerusalem became a battleground. Fighting was intense. Neighborhoods were destroyed. Thousands died or fled. When the war ended in 1949, Jerusalem was divided. Israel controlled West Jerusalem. Jordan controlled East Jerusalem, including the Old City. A wall, literal barbed wire and concrete barriers, split the city in half. For 19 years, Israelis couldn't access the Western Wall. Jordanians couldn't enter West Jerusalem. The city that had survived Babylonians, Romans, and Crusaders was now cut in two by a modern border. 1967. Reunification. In June 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israeli forces captured East Jerusalem from Jordan. For the first time since 1948, the city was unified under single control. Israelis celebrated. Palestinians mourned. The international community condemned the annexation as illegal. Jerusalem, once again, was at the center of an unresolved conflict. Jerusalem today. Walk through Jerusalem today, and you'll see all of it at once. Ultra-Orthodox Jews in Mea Shearim. Muslim calls to prayer echoing from the Old City. Christian pilgrims walking the Via Dolorosa. Israeli flags, Palestinian flags, checkpoints, holy sites, cafes, protests. The population is nearly 1 million, roughly 60% Jewish, 35% Muslim, a few percent Christian. It's Israel's capital, though most of the world doesn't recognize East Jerusalem as such. Palestinians claim it as the capital of a future state. Archaeologists are still digging. Every construction project uncovers something: a Byzantine church, a Roman street, a Canaanite wall. The layers keep appearing. The Old City, barely 1 square kilometer, contains the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock. 3 of the most contested religious sites on earth within walking distance of each other. Pilgrims still come, millions every year. Jews pray at the Western Wall. Christians walk where they believe Jesus walked. Muslims visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. And every day the question hangs in the air: who does this city belong to? The question with no answer. Canaanites built it. David claimed it. Solomon glorified it. Babylon destroyed it. Persia allowed its return. Rome crushed it. Christianity sanctified it. Islam conquered it. Crusaders massacred for it. Ottomans governed it. Britain divided it. Israel reunified it. And through all of that, through 3,000 years of war, worship, destruction, and rebuilding, Jerusalem is still here, not as a museum, as a living, breathing, arguing, praying, working city. Maybe that's the only answer that matters. Not who it belongs to, but that it survived. To billions of people across history, this is the place where empires fought for it. Not because it's on a coast, not because it controls a trade route, not because it's wealthy, because it means something. To billions of people across history, this city has been the center of the world, not geographically, spiritually, symbolically. And that belief, that meaning, has kept it alive when logic says it should have disappeared. Cities fall, empires collapse, civilizations fade. But Jerusalem, destroyed and rebuilt, conquered and reconquered, burned, razed, sieged, and starved, and still standing. There's no other city on earth with that story, no other place that has been this important to this many people, for this long. The future, uncertain. The conflict, unresolved. But after 3,000 years, one thing is clear. Jerusalem isn't going anywhere. It's survived Nebuchadnezzar. It survived Titus. It survived the Crusades. It'll survive whatever comes next. Because this city has never been about survival. It's been about meaning. And as long as people believe in it, it will endure. After hearing 3,000 years of history compressed into 40 minutes, what struck you most? Was it the resilience, the repetition, the layers of belief built on top of each other? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories about places that refuse to die, subscribe. There are more cities like this, just not many.